Let's start with the obvious. The average person sleeps around 8 hours a night. That's a third of a lifetime. Over 75 years, that's roughly 25 years spent with eyes closed. If sleep disappears, every person literally receives an extra life, inside the one they already have. This isn't a metaphor, it's arithmetic. And the initial thoughts for most people would be euphoric. Finally enough time to do everything. Finish the project without sacrificing sleep. Study after work without the feeling of stealing time from recovery. Travel at night. Work during the day. Read in between. Live a double life within a single one. For ambitious people, this sounds like the ultimate victory over time. The one resource that's always in short supply. The economy would respond immediately. Global GDP could multiply. People would work more, consume more, produce more. Restaurants, stores, transportation, entertainment, everything would go fully around the clock. Not out of necessity, but out of genuine demand. Cities would stop going to sleep at night. New York, which calls itself the city that never sleeps, would finally earn that title, literally. Science would accelerate. Researchers would gain thousands of additional hours per year. Medicine, physics, technology, everything would move faster. Artists would create more. Athletes would train longer. Scientists would think deep. It would seem as though humanity had finally received what it always dreamed of, time. But this is exactly where the question that changes everything begins. What would we do with all that, and what would it do to us? Because history shows that when people are given more resources, they don't always become happier. Sometimes they simply find new ways to feel like they're not enough. The perfect world on the surface is only the first layer. Beneath it lies something far more and far more troubling. One of the least noticed functions of sleep is that it serves as a universal excuse. I'm tired. I need to rest. Tomorrow, after I've slept. These phrases protect us from the relentless pressure of productivity. They give us a legitimate right to stop. When sleep disappears, so does that right. In a sleepless world, every person would have exactly the same amount of time. No more, I didn't get to it, I was busy. No more, I needed to sleep. Time stops being scarce, and that's precisely what makes it a more brutal tool of comparison. If everyone has the same hours and you achieved less than someone else, it simply means you used your time worse. No more mitigating circumstances, only results. Competition would become merciless. The job market, already demanding more and more from people, would receive fresh fuel. Employers would expect greater output. After all, employees now have more hours. Startups would operate around the clock. Freelancers would take on more projects. Students would study longer. And all of it, not from enjoyment, but from the fear of falling behind, because everyone else isn't sleeping either. Psychologists call this the expanding horizon of expectations. When capabilities grow, expectations grow with them, or faster. In the 1950s, an 8-hour workday felt like an achievement. Today, many people work 10 to 12 hours and still feel like it isn't enough. In a sleepless world, the standard would likely shift toward 14 to 16 hours and be called the new normal. Time would become the primary source of social pressure, not money, not status, but how you spend your extra 8 hours. What do you do at night? Would become a loaded question. People who chose rest, creativity, or simply doing nothing would feel guilty. In a world where everyone has spare time and no legitimate reason not to use it, the paradox of having more time is that it doesn't liberate, it obligates. And the more time you have, the more is expected of you. Sleep was not just rest, it was a natural boundary that protected us and from the endless demand of us. Sleep is not simply rest for the body. It is active work performed by the brain, work that most people know almost nothing about. And if you remove it, the consequences go far deeper than tiredness. During sleep, the brain performs several critically important functions. The first is memory consolidation. Everything you learned during the day, facts, skills, emotions, impressions, gets packaged into long-term memory during sleep and connected to existing knowledge. This is why a problem you couldn't solve the night before suddenly seems obvious in the morning. The brain was literally working on it while you slept. Without this process, learning would become shallow. Information would arrive, but fail to stick. People would read more and remember less. The second function is emotional processing. During the REM phase of sleep, the brain replays experienced events, but without the stress hormones noradrenaline and cortisol. This allows painful experiences to be reviewed from a safe distance and their emotional charge to be reduced. Sleep is, in effect, a built-in therapist. Research by neuroscientist Matthew Walker shows that people with disrupted REM sleep react significantly more intensely to stress, regulate emotions far less effectively, and are more prone to anxiety and depression. The third function is brain cleansing through the glymphatic system. At night, during sleep, brain cells literally shrink, making space for a flushing process, washing away toxic proteins, including those associated with Alzheimer's. This is a process that simply does not occur during. Without it, the brain would gradually, and even if the body hypothetically never grew tired, neural connections would degrade. There is something that gets discussed, least of all when we talk about sleep. It isn't physiology and it isn't productivity. It's culture, meaning, and what makes us human in the deepest sense of the word. Dreams are one of the oldest forms of human experience. For thousands of years, they served as a source of inspiration, revelation, fear, and story. The ancient Greeks built temples where people came specifically to receive prophetic dreams. Many artists, scientists, and writers describe their greatest ideas as arriving during sleep or at the boundary between sleep and waking. Paul McCartney claimed the melody of yesterday came to him in a dream. Dmitri Mendeleev described seeing the structure of the periodic table in the moment of falling asleep. Salvador Dali turned the state between sleep and reality into the foundation of his entire art. Without sleep, none of this would have existed, along with thousands of other things. Something subtler would disappear. Ritual. Humanity lives by rhythms, day and night, work and rest, waking and sleeping. These boundaries structure not only time, but meaning. Sleep on it is not just a saying. It is the lived experience of billions of people who survived a night between a problem and its resolution. Without night, there is no morning. Without a pause, there is no new beginning. Life becomes one unbroken day with no edge and no horizon. Also lost would be one of the most intimate human experiences, the vulnerability of sleep. A sleeping person trusts the world around them to others. It is an act of trust, repeated every night. In families, parents watching over sleeping, partners who see each other in a moment of complete open. Sleep makes us softer, not just physically, but emotionally. A world without this vulnerability would be harsher simply because one of the main sources of, and finally, the most, if we had infinitely more time, it would not make us happier. Because happiness is not determined by the number of hours. It is determined by the quality of presence within those hours. And presence requires recovery. Recovery requires a pause. The pause is